Hey, good evening, everybody. How are you? This is Freddie Ewan, three-time GM of the Year, 2022 Pantheon Cup champion, the 2023 TPFFKAL regular season champion, the 2024 Pantheon Cup runner-up. Week 14 is in the books, and you right now, depending on how many leagues right now, either your fantasy football season is over or season two begins. Super exciting. I am in six leagues, made the playoffs out of four of them. The league I really want to make the playoffs in, the TPFFKL, I've made it the four previous years. I did not make it this year. I finished right out. Hands up to my boy David Bowser, though. Bowser gets the last playoff spot. I had relied on my boy Jalen Hurts the last night to win me a game in a couple leagues, and Jalen has the worst game of his career. It was pretty ugly. It's pretty tough sledding to be a Philadelphia Eagles fans right now, but I always think things could be a lot worse. You can be a Commander fan, you could be a New York Giant fan. So, you always got to say, hey, we lost three in a row. But unlike the Cowboys, we won the Super Bowl twice in the last 30 years. The Commanders went to the AFC NFC Championship last year, and now they're like 2-11 or something, and they still have to play us twice. So we'll get some wins under our belt. Hopefully, we'll get it together. But yeah, rough sledding for the Philadelphia Eagles. Anyway, what we're going to talk today about is fantasy football and whatnot. There's a couple of you probably sitting at home right now saying, why didn't I make the fantasy football playoffs? And always there's a lot of factors that goes into fantasy football. When you look at fantasy football playing wise, the year wise, um, you always look at the people who make the most transactions, the people who make the most moves are usually going to be the ones that get into the playoffs. There are some ifs and whats, and this is usually with redraft leagues and whatnot. If you have a league where, you have more salary cap than another, or the John Galt League where no teams are balanced, it really depends on how much salary cap you have. I know a guy in one league that didn't make a lot of moves at all, but he had a huge amount of salary and, hit the players, and but you still got to hit the players. You still got to look for great waiver wire picks that were on there, and you got to get out there and make trades. There's three types of fantasy football players. There's guys that actually know what they're doing. There's guys that actually have no idea what they're doing, and then there's something in between. But if you put the work in, I see guys. It usually doesn't happen to me because I don't know if I'm the one of the unluckiest guys fantasy football players in the world or not, but I see guys that usually when they put the work in, when they're the guys that are, trying to make the trades and making the takes, those are usually the guys that are going to be going to the playoffs. The guys that aren't are usually guys who are just sitting their roster here and there, not picking up anyone up at waivers. Someone gets hurt, oh well, we'll just put someone else in, not really following the trends. Keeping guys in that have been really good the beginning of the year, not doing the matchups, starting the same defense every week, starting the same kicker every week, guys like that. And there's exceptions in everything. Just like it is in a poker tournament, there's exceptions in anything. But for the most part, if you're gonna put the work into fantasy football, you're gonna make the trades, you're gonna look. Play the matchups, put the people in, get guys off the waiver wire, make the trades, you're usually going to end up doing pretty well. But if you didn't make the fantasy football playoffs, and this year no different. There were six guys in the first round that didn't turn into anything. There were injuries. Malik Neighbors was out all year. Joe Burrow was out all year. Terry McLaurin was out. Well, Ayuk wasn't playing. Joe Mixon didn't even play at all this year. There's always injuries. There's always injuries. Mike Evans, who's seemed to be injury proof. He was out. So it's like God, and I you got to feel bad for Daniel Jones too. Philip Rivers might be a playoff guy. We're gonna be on here tomorrow night. We're gonna try to get Mike Dang on here. He was a guest on the show not too long ago. We're gonna try to get Magic Matt on here too. Magic Matt is he's a dude from South Jersey, but I mean this dude really knows his fantasy football. He played us in a couple of the DraftKings with us, and he was sharing his DraftKings stuff the other night, and I think he was like At one point, he was winning $100,000 in a DraftKings thing. And this dude's, I've been watching this dude. He makes a lot of trades. He's in the playoffs in a, $500 league that we're in. And hopefully we're gonna get him on the show because this dude seems to know his stuff really well. Still trying to get Billy. Billy always says he's too busy for us. But let's talk about how you didn't make the playoffs. Some of this I don't know is accurate because I had this guy on a team where I went 11 and 3 in Baker Mayfield. But if you kept starting Baker Mayfield, you probably started to slide down at the end of the year a little bit. Baker has not had a good ending to his season. Evans may change that, but I have a bye week in one league where Baker is my starter, and I'm probably going to look at starting some quarterback on waivers. I had Daniel Jones too. Picked up Jaden Daniels, and it doesn't look like Daniels is going to play the rest of the year. Daniel Jones and people who are going to have to stick with Mayfield, you have to be very careful because Mayfield's been really off. The matchups are going to play. We're going to talk about that a little more tomorrow, how to win at fantasy football, but this is why you lost. You probably kept Baker Mayfield in too long. And along with Baker, the other thing that you probably did is you probably kept Emeka in too long too. Emeka was hot early, and he really came out. And guy was going to look like the rookie of the year, but he did not look like that either. This you can blame a lot of the pundits on. This dude as well. In the beginning of the year, everyone was talking about, hey, Bill is going to be the man. And Bill had a couple games, but really didn't turn out to be anything else. People held on to him. If you traded Bill early, I think I traded him in the league, you were in good shape. But this guy was a sixth, seventh round pick. Commanders had a high hopes for this year, but he was probably rostered for way too long for most teams, most players. Here's another guy. This guy was injured a little bit, but at the same time, I mean, talk about a guy, and the Jaguars are playing great now. I mean, they're playing great football, but this guy, I mean, Brian Thomas Jr. won leagues for people last year. I mean, he was phenomenal. Phenomenal last year, right up there with neighbors on how well he played. But Brian Thomas Jr. did not have a good year at all. Sophomore slump big time. If you drafted him, a lot of people drafted him in the, mid-second round. I remember in one league, I had a choice between him and Puka. And to tell you the truth, I wanted to take him. And, the Koji on my plan would said, let's take Puka. And God, thank God we did, or we would not be where we were. But yeah, Brian Thomas really just a tough, tough year. Here's another guy. He just came back. He played a decent game, but and I'm bringing up all Buccaneers, but God, Bucky. If you had traded Bucky early and gotten something for him, you would be in good shape right now. A lot of people never wanted to trade Bucky Irving. They kept saying he's going to come back this week. He's going to come back this week. He doesn't come back this week. Bucky Irving was out for most of the season, just came back. He might be a good guy to grab have in the playoffs, but at the same time, if you had Bucky on your injured reserve, you probably could have traded him a ton of times because I know I was thinking about making offers for him, and thank God I didn't because, the guy just came back. Um, Tough year for Bucky Irving, another guy who hit a sophomore slump. Um, this is the other guy, started off like absolutely horrendous. Pretty much the whole Bengals team started out absolutely horrendous. But if you trade away Chase Brown, like a lot of people did, you are kicking yourself right now because Chase Brown has been hot, hot, hot. He's going to be a hot guy in the playoffs. I guarantee there are a lot of teams in the playoffs right now that have Chase Brown on their team. Oh, I can tell you one thing is I had Devontae Smith. You got Devontae Smith over the last 4 weeks. Devontae started out great season to start out with. I had Hurts and Devontae in one league and just dominated, was in first place for most of the time and slowly slipped away. I finished out of the bye week in third place. A lot of it due to Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith the last 4 weeks. AJ Brown has been hot, but Smitty has just been off, and that's the whole Eagles offense has been off, really, to tell you the truth. But really, Smitty looked really good at the beginning of the year, and has really fell off a lot. AJ Brown's obviously got his scrap. AJ, even though the Eagles are playing bad offensively, AJ's still putting up some great numbers. Here it is. Here it is. I knew I had him up anyway. somewhere, but it's like you kept starting Emeka. I don't know if I 100% agree with this because I have Baker and Emeka in one league and when went 11-3, but I also had a good team. I had Puka, Lamb, CMC on that team too. But Emeka has really came off. In the playoffs, there's probably going to be guys that are going to be on the waiver wire. I have to look at the Buccaneers matchups a little bit better, but there's probably going to be guys on the waiver wire that you can probably start over a Mecca if you keep playing some of these guys that are in the slump, like Smitty, like a Mecca. You're probably not going to win your playoff game. That's just my humble opinion. I know a guy who is going to play those guys no matter what. He's probably going to be out in the first round of playoffs, but let's talk about another guy here. This guy, you never traded him away. Amari and Hampton. I had traded Amari and Hampton away in one league. Thank God I did. Everyone wasn't sure about him. He just came back. He had a pretty good game against the Eagles. I think he scored a touchdown getting right. He's probably going to be a good guy if you have him in the playoffs. But if you trade him away at the right time, you probably got a lot for him. I traded him with somebody else, got CMC back, and just hit the rolls from there. This guy, and thank God, and it's nothing against this guy, but for some reason I just never I don't ever have a lot of shares of Justin Jefferson for some reason. The guy's probably definitely a top three wide receiver, at least last year he was, and the year before that. JJ McCarthy just killed him. Justin Jefferson, horrible year. Jefferson was going probably Jefferson was going a lot of times between like sixth and seventh. After the first five, he was probably the sixth overall pick. Tough sledding, tough year for Justin Jefferson. Might not get easier. JJ McCarthy had a good game last week, but might not get easier for JJ. Minnesota needs a quarterback to throw this guy the ball big time. Big time. And I think it's over for this guy. There's been so many times, and like I said, I remember a few years ago when this guy scored. I think I was playing him. He scored five touchdowns in one game. But Christmas Kamara is what we called him because he had so many great late game runs. And it was probably about 3 years ago. But Kamara is done. Dunzo. I think he was probably a fourth, fifth round pick, but didn't really get much at all with him this year. Really, just a bad year. Another guy here, I'm going to put this guy in another category too. Another guy that I need to put in the Keenan Allen category is everyone thought Keenan Allen was going to start going and going. He hit the end zone a couple times. Back on the Chargers, where he's had great years. He had a good year last year on the Bears, but Keenan just did not get going too much. None of that offense did really. McConkey played all right here and there. Um, but another guy that I really was disappointed with, which I am responsible for taking this guy everywhere, best ball lineups everywhere, is DJ Moore. And DJ Moore, it's just I thought in that new Chicago offense that DJ Moore was going to be the man, and it's been anything like that. Dunzy's been the guy there. Even when the Dunzy was out last week, DJ Moore did not do anything. So it's like, if you got caught by Keenan Allen or DJ Moore, the veterans, you're probably in big trouble, but yeah, I had DJ Moore on a bunch of teams. I thought he was going to do really well. I thought I was stealing him at certain times in best ball leagues and whatnot, and I kept starting him at certain points, and he was just awful, just awful, and you couldn't even trade him away at that point. Another guy. Here's what we're gonna get. I'm gonna get into some stats in just a little bit, but in one league, the guy was obviously a Ravens fan, and I think he drafted, Derrick Henry. He was it was a redraft league, and the guy drafts Lamar Jack. He drafts maybe Derrick Henry first and Lamar Jackson second. He maybe had the 12th, 13th pick or something like that. And it's always super wary when you're drafting quarterbacks that early, just because there's so many, especially in single quarterback leagues. If you want to talk about a super flex, it's something different, much different. But drafting Lamar Jackson when you can get as your second pick, when you can go wide receiver, running back, drafting that quarterback, even and if that guy goes down, it's not going to be good news, and you're just going to be so dependent on those guys at the quarterback position, just so dependent on it. Lamar had a down year, was injured, didn't play that great. Definitely not going to get the MVP this year, and You saw him burn. You just basically saw him burn. Another guy. Everyone thought, for the most part, I stayed away from this guy. I had him in a couple leagues last year, but I stayed away from him. I did not like how Terry was going through the holdout with Washington, the injuries. Terry's been hurt here and there. I think he had one or two good games. He had a great game against the Denver Broncos, surprisingly, against the Denver Broncos defense, but Terry has been awful. The whole Commander team has just been awful. Debo Samuel's been decent, but it's like if you stuck with Terry right now, it was like, oh, boom. Here's an argument I'm going to get on my boy James about this guy, but it's like, I'm responsible for this too. Drafting him in a bunch of best ball leagues. We really thought that this was a guy that you can get in the fourth round, fifth round. Everyone thought Kenneth Walker was going to be the bell cow. Drew was still out on Charbonnet and whatnot, but Charbonnet turned into a guy that was getting a lot of goal line work, scoring a lot of touchdowns. Walker was here and there, but Walker never really had that breakout crushing game. And I know Charbonnet had a lot of good games besides that. But let's take a look at this really quick. I just want to bring up the stats for everybody and just take a look and see what the stats are going. And we'll start here. We'll start with the how do I get this down? We'll start with the quarterbacks, the top quarterbacks. Josh Allen was the consensus number one or two quarterback and finishes that way for the regular season. Patrick Mahomes, great year. Patrick Mahomes had a great year. Average, we had got him in one league, played great. Mahomes had a good year. Dak Prescott had a really good year. Offense was great with Dak Prescott. Of course, they're going to score points to this Dallas defense. So Matthew Stafford is fourth in points right now. If you had Matthew Stafford, you are a very happy person. You're probably in the playoffs. Same thing with this guy, Drake May. I mean, Drake May might win the MVP of the league this year. He's averaged 19.9 points, 259 points. Great year. Jalen Hurts, everyone's killing Jalen Hurts, but Jalen Hurts only threw two interceptions going into yesterday. And had put up points, averaging 19.1. Williams was playing good. Herbert stayed good. Knicks. Goff, Daniel Jones was a lot. Daniel, of course, he's hurt. Philip Rivers is going to be the man. We're going to talk about that a little bit tomorrow. But Daniel Jones was on waivers at the beginning of the year, got picked up. And if you picked up Daniel Jones at the beginning of the year, you are probably in the fantasy football playoffs. Jordan Love, nah, so-so. Trevor Lawrence, nah, not really. Baker, look at Baker way downhill. Baker has fell down all the way down to quarterback number 14. At one point, I think he was quarterback number two or three. Darnold, Jackson, Dart's been a little, came in, Jacoby Brissett, but you got guys down here that like Tua has had a horrible year, absolutely horrible year. CJ Stroud, I don't know what's going on with Houston with him. Cam Ward obviously wasn't going to do it. Jane Daniels only played a couple games, but there you take a look at that. And the running backs, are we surprised about any of this? Jonathan Taylor, number one running back, has not been good at all lately. Might not get back now. Who knows what's going to go on with that Colts offense? I'm afraid of starting guys, especially this weekend in the playoffs. CMC has to be one of the fantasy football players of the year. CMC was not the first overall consensus pick that he was last year. He was probably about seven or eight. I know he went behind Barkley. He went behind Gibbs. He went behind Bijan. He was probably the fourth running back taken. And CMC has been, if you have CMC on your team, you are probably in the playoffs. Snare guy. Gibbs has been phenomenal and getting better as it goes. If you have Jamar Gibbs in the playoffs right now, you are probably a happy guy. A chain was, way early second, late first round pick, definitely worth it. A chain has held up, not been injured. He's got a question mark. Bijan Robinson, early pick, but did really well. Here's a couple guys. James Cook has been phenomenal. If you have James Cook, he looks like the sixth running back overall. The other guy, Javonte Williams, came out of nowhere. If you have Javonte Williams on your lineup, you're probably in the playoffs right now. Another guy, Henry, ETN was another guy. ETN, at one point we didn't think ETN was even going to be the starter. ETN turns out to be the 11th overall running back. Saquon, bad year. I mean, just bad year. And, it's kind of to be expected a little bit. He ran the 2,000 yards last year. If you look at the stat line of guys who run 2,000 yards in the year after, it is not good. And, Barkley's, if you have you're gonna have to start him. He had a good game last time. They play the Raiders this week, so I think Barkley's gonna get it back together. But obviously, he did not have the year that he had last year. Rico, baby, Rico. I picked Rico. Rico was picked up off a lot of waivers. I picked Rico up when I think he had two 30 back games. Genty. This was another guy, rookie going late, and there's a lot of guys that went
that went after him up there. Chase Brown, decent year. Brees Hall, Judkins, very good year. If you got Judkins, you're probably in good shape. Very, very good year. Let's go to the wide receivers, find out what's going on with them. JSN. If you have JSN, I traded JSN in one league for Tom Tracy last year, keeper league, and kicking my ass right now because JSN has been anything but. If you have JSN, you're in the fantasy football playoffs. Puka, same thing. Great year by Puka. Um, uh, the next guy, unbelievable, George Pickens. George Pickens might be the fantasy surprise of the year. Guy was unbelievable. Amon-Ra, great year, consistent. The other guy down here, Devontae Adams. I mean, Devontae Adams, he was off a little bit last week, but I think at one point the guy scored like 8 touchdowns in like 4 games or something. And I can tell you for one thing is I did not take a lot of Devontae Adams because I didn't see how it was going to align really with him and Puka, but Devontae is getting all the goal line work. Puka is getting those long, physical games. I think Adams and Puka are a lot alike, which I was worried about, but McVay just knows how to run that offense and score points. I mean, anyone on the Rams right now, you're gonna be happy with. Chase was okay. Chase was okay. He was not the consensus #1 overall pick, but I don't think you can be too upset with Jamar Chase. Michael Pittman had a great year. And the Colts, I don't know how they're gonna do from now. Nico Collins, yeah. Jalen Waddle had a good year. Tet had a good year for the time he was played. Drake London for the time he was played. AJ Brown actually had a decent year, believe it or not, when you look at it. This guy had a big year. Chris Olave, very big year. T. Higgins did not have a good year. Jameson Williams. This guy, Jameson Williams, will give you 20 points one game and a donut the next day. And, just looking here, Wandale, baby. Wandale Robinson. Everyone giving me shit about him. Wandale Robinson averaging 10.6 points per game. You'd look at the highest average, it's JSN, Puka, Rashi. If you stuck it out with Rashi and the 6 games he was spent when he came back, looks pretty good. But I am really impressed with anyone who had George Pickens. Definitely really impressed. Tight end wise, Trey McBride was awesome. Trey McBride averaged 14.5 points. He's got almost 60 fantasy points more than the next guy, which is Travis Kelsey, which he's not been out of the, Kelsey's averaged 10.4, 10.4. If you look at the averages, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys. Kelsey's right up there. Tyler Warren was the guy that you wanted as the rookie tight end. Dalton Kincaid has played well. Kittle back. Tucker Craft was a beast until he went on the IR. If you had Tucker Craft, you were in good shape. Bowers is, we'll see what happens with Bowers. He had a great game, and it seems like the Raiders have no one to pass the ball to. But like it is, very much like it is. That is, that's fantasy football for you. Why you lost at fantasy football? Sometimes it's just how the bottom flows. It's sometimes, you're going to be in situations where there's a lot of luck that has to do with fantasy football. This is a weekly game. So it's like, you can score 187 points and kick the shit out of the guy one week and you get one win. And then you can score 160 points the next week and the other guy scores 161 points and it's still a loss. And there's a lot of luck that goes into it. There's obviously a lot of luck. Players get hurt. This is why I hate that. I can't stand the guillotine leagues because if you get a guy gets hurt, you're out, you're finished. Where if you get a guy gets hurt, you lose the game, but your season still goes on. So that's why I just think guillotine leagues just need something to do with injuries almost because it just makes it's just almost an unfair it's almost unfair. Guys get injured, but you can replace those guys as the season goes on. You can't do it in a guillotine league. That's for a whole nother conversation. But same thing. It's you can get wins, you can not get wins, you can play teams that are hot, you can play teams that are not. Over the scene of the 14 weeks in the playoffs in the fantasy football season, it usually evens out to if you're going to put the guys in, if you're going to study it, if you're going to put the work in, you are probably going to have a good team. If you're just kind of slopping around and just putting in, oh, well, Yahoo says this guy's going to score, more points than this guy, you're probably not going to do well in fantasy football. That's just the way it is. But make sure you keep playing. And we're going to be on here tomorrow night. We're going to tell you how to win at fantasy football in the playoffs. Completely different league when the playoffs start. The matchups have so much more to do with it in in the playoffs than they do in the regular season. I'm going to talk tomorrow about a guy, I call him the fantasy football god, besides me. But, this guy would love to have him on the show. Bowser would love to have you on the show sometime. But this guy, last year in the fantasy football playoffs, he benched Jamar Gibbs. He didn't win the game, and people gave him shit for benching Jamar Gibbs. But I'm looking at this a whole different way and saying this guy had the balls to bench his best player because he had a bad matchup. And that's how you win. If that worked out for him, he would have become a genius. But everyone's like, "Oh, you benched it. You're too dumb." I thought it was genius. You need balls. You need to put it all out on the line when you're in the fantasy football playoffs. You need to make decisions, especially there's going to be a lot of big underdogs. If you're a big underdogs, you need to look for home run plays. We're going to be with Mike Dang tomorrow. We're going to talk all about that. Anyway, that's the show for tonight. That's why you didn't make the fantasy football playoffs. You probably started a whole bunch of commanders, stuck with Baker for too long. That's about it. I'll talk to you soon. Have a great evening. Fly Eagles fly.